Hello again, HI 122. In this video I'm going to go over some of the topics in chapter 16, and the first question we're talking about here is explaining the expansion of the Ottoman Empire, and this is a nice map that shows you the height of Ottoman expansion in the beginning of the 16th century. After their conquest of Constantinople, for those of you that took World Civ 1, you might remember that, they tried to extend into Europe under Suleiman the Magnificent, one of the greatest rulers of the Ottoman Empire. They advanced up the Danube and they seized Belgrade, and they defeated the Hungarians at the Battle of Mohacs on the Danube. And eventually they moved into Austria and they advanced as far as the gates of Vienna before finally being defeated in 1529. At the same time, they extended their power in the Western Mediterranean until they were defeated by the Spanish at the Battle of Lepanto in 1571. Also in the second half of the 1600s, they were still fighting in southeastern Europe until they were pushed out of this area. They will never be a threat again to Europe, but they will exist until the end of the First World War in 1917. And again, one of the reasons for the decline of the Ottomans is that as time goes on, these sultans and rulers are not as strong or effective as Suleiman was. How did they rule? The Sultan is the supreme authority, and that's traced back to the Bey, who was the tribal leader, the first among equals of the Turks. And they had tax systems as long as the overall living status of the tribe was good. His authority is not questioned. And they adopted some Byzantine positions as well and practices, but at the heart of the Sultan's power was the harem at the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. This was constructed by Mehmet II, and it is the administrative center and the private residence of the Sultan and his family. The harem is where he resided with his concubines. He did not marry, but he chose several, his favorites, to live with. And if one of them gave him a son, one of these sons will eventually become the new Sultan. And this was started by Suleiman. Members of the harem, like the Janissaries, were often of slave origin, and they formed an elite in the Ottoman society. Since the enslavement of Muslims was forbidden, slaves were taken from non-Islamic peoples. And that's what this picture here is illustrating. The Ottoman Empire, like its Chinese counterpart, sought to recruit officials from the basis of merit that is established by the Devshirme system. This is where these slaves were then taken from these conquered areas and they are educated in this collection. And youthful candidates were selected from the non-Muslim population in villages throughout the empire. And you can see here the kids with their worldly possessions and the parents talking to the priest. This guy went through the same process himself back in his childhood. Contrary to myth, these harems were not for sexual purposes, but it's really his extended family. And it's similar to Christian nunnery, with its hierarchical organizations, enforced chastity, and rule of silence. Sometimes this is called the Sultanate of Women because these people were so powerful. The Grand Vizier was the chief minister. The Sultan would exist behind a screen. He wouldn't actually look at anybody, and then the Vizier would indicate to the Sultan what business needs to be taken care of. This is a nice chronology here if you want to take a look at it when you get a chance. Religion is Sunni Muslim. In the beginning, they are very tolerant of minorities, but eventually, as time goes on, the Armenians will be forced to convert, and this is a problem to this day, the status of the Armenian population in this part of the world. And this describes what women are doing in this particular part. And by the late 1600s, the Ottomans start to go into decline again because many of these rulers are not as efficient, they're not as tolerant of local traditions, and they become corrupt. And this leads into the Safavid dynasty in Persia. And why does this dynasty eventually decline? Historians are still debating this today. Shah Abbas was probably the greatest one, and in this passage here, they describe how the conquered areas of these Persians will be forced to convert to Shia Islam. This was a great school that the Shah Abbas established. This is the Royal Academy at Isfahan. You can't quite see the end of that here. And this is similar to what European monks would have cells. These are their rooms where they work and they study. The last question, the decline of the Mughal Empire after Akbar, which is the golden era of the Mughal Empire in India. Jahangir inherits the throne, but he is not a very effective ruler. He likes to drink and he likes to eat. And his wife, Nur Jahan, eventually will become the power behind the throne. And she enriches her own family, and she arranged for her niece, Mumtaz Mahal, to marry her husband's third son and the ultimate successor, Shah Jahan. When he gets into the throne, he demonstrates the single-minded quality of his grandfather, but much more brutally because he assassinates all the rivals to his position. And he will be in power for about 30 years, and he expands the empire for a time in the Deccan Plateau to Samarkand, north of the Hindu Kush, but his rule is marred by domestic problems. The treasury is bankrupt because of Nur Jahan's penchant for luxury and ambitious charity projects. While most of the subjects are living in poverty, the court is living in luxury. And there is primitive conditions, and that's a problem in India to this day. It's hard to travel within the country. And eventually this famine sets in, and men abandon the towns and villages and they wander. And in 1648, Shah Jahan moves his capital from Agra to Delhi, and he built a fort to protect this new capital city. Shah Jahan is best known for the Taj Mahal, one of the wonders of the ancient world. And this is another reason for the decline of the Mughal Empire. The building of this area will bankrupt the country. After Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb comes in, and he is also an intolerant ruler. He is a strict Muslim. He tries some positive things. He ends the practice of sati, where women throw their bodies on their dead husband's funeral pyre. He eliminates the castration of eunuchs, and he stopped the extraction of illegal taxes. He is not as successful stopping gambling, drinking, and prostitution. And tolerance of Hindus will not be allowed either. They will be forced to convert to Islam. Finally, the Europeans are moving in during this time, and the English will arrive, and they will take over from the French eventually. The 7 Years' War goes on, and the French and the English fight. Joseph Dupleix is the main French leader in this part of the world, and they will fight against the forces of Sir Robert Clive. And the result of this battle is that the British will become the dominant foreign power in India from 1753 to the middle of the 19th century. The East India Company will be running the affairs of the British in the subcontinent. And there's a nice picture of what bankrupted the Mughal Empire. It's a beautiful palace. And this is built to Mumtaz Mahal. Shah Jahan's wife died, and he built this beautiful crypt for her in her memory. And that's it.